Hello everyone, welcome to Prog and Progeny. Hi Tallulah, how's it going?
It's good. How are you?
Very well. As you can see, if you're watching on YouTube or on our Patreon, that it's another video episode. It seemed to be very well received actually. We had some nice
Mm.
comments. People like to see us apparently. I can understand why they want to see you, not me so much.
Yeah, I'm not sure
But
why.
But yeah, some really nice messages actually from people. But let's get on with it. What have we got today? Chapter 11, isn't it?
Chapter 11. It was a good chapter.
Yeah, it was. It was weird rereading it actually.
Quite a
Kind
sad
of.
chapter.
That's how it felt. It was quite down, even though we were being really at our most successful. It was quite a depressing chapter for me to read it.
Yeah.
It kind of
And
brought
to
it all
live it,
back.
I presume.
It did bring it all back, yeah. All the shit that was going on. Yeah, what were we thinking? We had everything going for us. It was all great, and then it
It
wasn't.
does.
Yeah, where did we start? I mean, the chapter opens with me saying something about the songwriting of Clutching at Straws and how we started it round at
You say
Steve's
that
house.
Steve was coming up with most of the ideas.
He was, yeah, yeah. I mean, he had been already from probably certainly Misplaced Childhood. He came up with more than me, quite a bit more than me. And Clutching at Straws, it got even more pronounced. I think I was just having a really hard time coming up with new ideas, and
Mm.
we weren't, we didn't have that place like we have here. I'm at the Racket Club, by the way, and to having somewhere where you can be creative, get
Do you
together,
want to
and
show us, give us
a little tour.
a little
Yeah, why
tour?
not? This
For
is
those who
the
are listening to this and not watching, we're now being
yeah.
shown some
This is
keyboards.
the keyboards, yeah. And then we have Pete's area over here, and then Steve Rothery's area over there. His area is really
It's
messy.
very messy.
It's got
It's
just
all
gear
very
everywhere. Look,
cluttered and
pedals all
messy.
over the floor. There's hundreds of
Oh my god, it
guitars.
looks like a hoarder's house.
It looks like a guitar shop. And then through the window we have Ian's drum kit just there,
Nice.
and then Mr. Hogarth's corner over here. Well, he's got a few guitars as well. Well, more than a
Yeah.
few. So I can count
Wow, he's got a
six.
lot of instruments.
Yeah, and some percussion stuff. A whole
Yeah,
bunch of
tambourines.
tambourines, a stack of tambourines, and weird stuff like that. Anyway, for the people just listening, sorry about that. We're back in the room now. Um,
But go watch that on YouTube.
yeah, yeah. That's a good point actually. If you want to see the video rather than just listen, if you're listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, go to Patreon. The video's uploaded on Patreon, and you can see it there for free. You don't have to subscribe, but if you want to subscribe, that would be great. Anyway, so
Anyway,
get back to the writing. Yeah, I just found it really hard. I mean, I think it suits me being in a room with the rest of the guys. I feel more creative if I've got somebody to bounce off. I'm really not great at working on my own. So some people love to just get on and do stuff at home and then bring what they've written. It rarely works like that for me. It's more about what everybody else is doing and the sounds and the atmosphere. It makes such a difference having other people to play with rather than just being on your own. So I was struggling to write anything really at that point. And I think Steve was having a very creative time and coming up with lots of stuff. But Fish's lyrics, I really wasn't enjoying what he was writing because it was all very, it's just about drinking and drugs mostly, as far as I could tell.
really.
Um, yeah, but which is a shame because Steve was coming up with some great music, you know. But that's where we were, and I think we were in a pretty difficult time, between the band members. I mean, I spoke to before we started this call. Steve was still here because we'd been rehearsing today, and I had a chat with him, and I asked him to remind me about the thing that happens in that I talk about in the chapter about him and Fish having a big fight. We were mixing the album in Advision, a studio in London,
Mm.
and Steve and Fish had a big fight. Well, mainly Fish had a fight with Steve,
It
which
was your
culminated.
birthday.
It was my birthday exactly, and Steve and Fish had a big fight, Steve left the band, and Pete crashed his car all on the same night. And it
Yeah.
was my birthday. Happy birthday, me.
And you got locked in a room with a stripper.
Oh yeah, that was kind of a stupid one of those strippergram things. Yeah, I really fell for it. I wasn't aware of what was happening, and then I got left in this room with this woman in a long coat, and I was told that she was Chris Kimsey's manager's wife or something, and I didn't think anything of it. And they all kind of left the room one by one without me really noticing, and then I kind of went, oh, and then she's just there, and she just suddenly goes and opens the coat and is completely naked. And of course, they're all noses pressed up against the window, watching to see what my reaction would be. Of course, I was a bit shocked.
What was your reaction? Just awkwardness.
Well, because I realised straight away that I'd been set up. So it wasn't that exciting, to be honest.
Well, you didn't continue thinking it was Chris Kimsey's manager's wife.
No.
But he pinned him up against the wall, didn't he?
Well, this is the bit I got wrong, which is why I wanted to check with Steve. Apparently, he pinned him up against the wall in Hansa Studios when we were recording Misplaced Childhood. The fight that they did have a fight in Advision that on the night of my birthday, and Steve did actually leave the band, and it took Ian a few days to talk him round into rejoining. But a year or so previously, we were working in Berlin at Hansa, and so Hugh Stanley Clark, I don't know if you remember the story from then, but Hugh Stanley Clark, the record company guy, came over to hear what we were doing because me and Ian were worried that Chris Kimsey wasn't doing a very good job with the recording. And we called Hugh Stanley Clark and told him, and he flew straight out to the studio, and he asked to hear what we were doing. What I didn't realise was that both Fish and Steve took the opportunity of pitching to Hugh Stanley Clark their ideas for a solo project. So Steve had this idea, he wanted to do a solo project, and Fish pitched his idea for a solo project, which was something to do with like some sort of cover versions of a guy driving in a car, listening to the radio. He kind of did something about this sort of subject many years later. Apparently, Hugh liked Steve's idea, but didn't like Fish's idea. And then Fish then pinned Steve up against the wall and accused him of saving all his best ideas for his solo album, which is ridiculous because we'd just written Misplaced Childhood. So, the ideas on that album mostly came from Steve. So he certainly wasn't saving ideas for his solo album. And in fact, he didn't make a solo album for quite a few years after that anyway. So I got my stories mixed up. Yeah.
Were you pissed off that they both wanted to make solo albums and pitched it behind your back?
No, not really. I think it was always that Fish was always talking about making a solo album. And I think, to be honest, experience has shown since that when everybody goes off and does their own projects, it kind of helps
the band
reset things, helps everybody to say, okay, I've done something, use those ideas that I had that nobody liked, and all that sort of thing. So so it kind of, I think it's healthy for the band if people go off and do other things, and it did happen in the mid-90s. Everybody went and made solo albums except me. I just talked about it.
Although you were going to
talked about it with people like Stephen Wilson.
What I want to know about is this Lost Clutching album. There was speculation that you'd written a whole album and then binned it because the record company said it was too similar to Misplaced Child.
Yeah, so it wasn't at all. And I know you're not too familiar with early Marillion, but the first part of Clutching at Straws, which is the album we were working on, is 3 songs joined together, a bit like Misplaced Childhood, where you've got the songs all joined together: Hotel Hobbies, Warm Wet Circles, and That Time of the Night. They all work as a little trilogy together, I suppose. And we'd kind of written that, and then we had more that it carried on with, which was a bit waffly and wasn't that great. So that was the thing we pitched to the record company and Chris Kimsey, that was kind of rejected as being too similar to Misplaced Childhood because of the format. And then we didn't throw it all away. We kept the best bits of it, which was the first 3 songs, and just got rid of the end of it. Yeah, so there wasn't really another album. It became this sort of legend amongst the fans that we'd written a whole album like Misplaced Childhood that got thrown in the bin, but it's not true.
Okay. And you said that it was because everyone, the record company said it was too similar, but you said, well, record companies quite like that.
Yeah, I think they would have been happy with another Kaylee or another Lavender, something similar. So that's pretty much how they work, isn't it? You have a
Yeah.
success and repeat the formula. We didn't want to do that, so
Well, let's go back then from it all falling apart and Fish and Steve fighting and Steve quitting the band to when you go to Stanbridge Farm.
having this place makes such a difference. When we needed to write songs or write music, because we like to work together rather than at home on our own, we had to have somewhere. We didn't have our own place, so we would have to rent a residential rehearsal studio or somewhere, a space, And Stanbridge was one of those places. There was a few of them around,
What's all that stuff
which
behind you? Sorry. It's like Halloween decoration.
it was a song called Man of a Thousand Faces, and we used them on stage. They were like stage props.
Oh, sorry.
So they ended up here after we did that tour. So yeah, not having our own place, it was a bit of a problem because it cost a lot of money to rent these places. It was like a big, like Stanbridge was a farmhouse with a big barn, and they basically converted the barn into a rehearsal space. It wasn't very glamorous, put it like that. It was quite dark and damp, and being there in the middle of winter wasn't exactly inspiring, put it like that. And the amount of time we spent away from home, we'd just been on tour for about a year, and then we go in this residential studio to write, and then we're away from home for
Like
months.
3 months or something, wasn't it?
Yeah, it's hard, and if you've got kids, it's even harder.
Yeah, you said something quite sad about kind of missing your kids growing up.
Well, having been there when you were growing up, and spending a lot more time with you, Delilah and Jude, than I did with Freya and Kai, it made me realise what I'd missed,
Yeah.
with them, which is sad. And there's nothing you can do about it once it's gone, right?
No.
You can't turn the clock back.
Is that your biggest regret of being in the band?
I think it probably is actually. Yeah, it's the worst thing about it. I mean, it's great to be in a band. I'm so grateful to have had this career and to have this job, which isn't really a job, but don't tell anyone.
I know.
But yeah, like when you were growing up, I was like, I was at home in the mornings. It was great to have time to spend with you. And to be flexible about having time. But that
Yeah.
it wasn't always like that. And of course, we were on tour for
No,
for
and you
big
did
chunks.
go on tour for chunks of time. But when
Yeah.
you were home for a while.
Yeah. So in that sense, it's quite a privilege. But and it's great to be able to travel around the world and see places and just doing everything we do. But there is a price to pay, obviously.
So yeah, you're at Stanbridge Farm, and you're wasting a lot of money. Like that seemed to be a big thing as well. Maybe part of the reason that this was all kind of unraveling. Like
It
you
kind
paid for
of
the crew to be there or something.
we had Smick, who I spoke about, who I said would get on. He was there. Privet was there. Our sound engineer. He wasn't really doing anything, but we were paying them a full-time wage just
Why?
to be
Why
there.
were they there?
I think part of it was that we didn't want to lose them. We didn't want them to go off and work with other people.
Right. Yeah.
So it's like, okay, so if you want to hang on to your sound engineer, you have to pay them a retainer. But what was happening in the end was Privet was like very talented guy. We were paying him good money to sit around doing nothing, and very quickly he's like, I don't want to be doing this.
Yeah.
I'd rather be working. I want to be out there touring, And that's what he ended up doing. He ended up touring with Brian May and Gary Moore and a bunch of other people.
Not sitting around, not doing.
And if you've got somebody who's really good, people are going to want to employ them and
Yeah.
steal them off you. That's what happened with Rush. Actually, they offered Privet a job as soon as they heard him mix our sound, and
Did you
that's
take it?
No, he turned them down. But that's a hazard, right? Having
Oh,
good
sounds like
people.
we need to get Privet on.
We could do actually, yeah. That would be good actually. Yeah. He lives in
Um,
France now. He's retired.
oh, nice.
Yeah, I think he'd had
Sounds
enough
like
of
you've
being on
had
the
a very
road.
good career.
Yeah, but I think he'd really had enough of it because that, as I said, if you're not on the road, then you're not earning money. So, there comes a point where you go, "Look, I don't want to do this anymore." It's certainly a young person's game, really.
Yeah.
No, I was going to say
Cool.
when we were at Stanbridge, I discovered this online user game. It's like this is 1986. I was quite ahead of the curve. It's a thing called multi-user dungeon, which was like it's called Mud for short, and it was the very first. It was the very first
Video
online
game.
game that you could play with other people, literally. But it was only text. There was no pictures. But at the time, the fact that you could be online with other people and play a game with
Yeah.
them was
So that's
was
what you were just
really
spending most of your time doing.
well, no. But the thing was, it was on a mainframe computer. It needed a really powerful computer at the time, which was at Essex University. And as it was the university computer, you could only run the software between midnight and 6 a.m. So you could only play it between midnight and 6 a.m. So I used to stay up all night playing it.
Oh my god.
Yeah, I know, it's terrible.
Of course you did. Doesn't really
Yeah.
surprise me. So that's what you were doing. You'd be up all night playing a video game. Did the other band play this, or was it just you?
No, it was just me. Yeah. And then you
They
get
were
up
like,
about
Mark, why are you so
lunchtime,
tired?
get up at lunchtime, do 3 or 4 hours of jamming and trying to write songs, playing pool and
This is not a
just
real job.
plonking around on the keyboards, and then you'd have dinner and drink a load of wine or something, and then
Yeah.
do it, rinse and repeat. When we got the Racket Club, one of the things we kind of missed was that evening vibe when you're in there in the evening, have a few glasses of wine and you play, and it's different, And then when you're whilst having the Racket Club was amazing and great, we would work like an office job, without the with shorter hours, obviously. But we
Yeah.
wouldn't be here much in the
12 till
evenings. And if,
4.
in fact, when we were writing Brave, I remember me and Steve H used to come into the Racket Club in the evenings just to get a
Yeah, you
different
said that.
vibe. So I think we kind of that was like 1993. So we kind of missed the residential studio writing vibe, if you like, when we got the Racket Club. We did definitely we lost something, but it's also great not to be in a locked in an environment where you're just literally there 24/7, expected to come up with music, and you can't leave until you do. It's not
Yeah.
that's not good either. It
Chris
was
Kimsey describes Fish as having lost it to John.
yeah, with his lyric writing. This was prior to recording the album because I think he wasn't really enjoying the subject matter of the lyrics either. Like, I was, as I said, I wasn't really relating to what he was writing about.
I was going to say quite a lot of albums are about drinking and drugs, but it's usually more metaphorical.
I suppose, yeah, it was just a little bit too on the nose. I don't know. But yeah, hotel hobbies, drugs, all night circles. It's kind of not really. That's kind of more of a romantic song, I think. But there is definitely some drink and drugs references in it. That time of the night, drugs. Just for the record, kind of drugs, drink. Sugar Mice isn't. There's the last straw. What you use a straw for.
Right.
So yeah, it's throughout the album. It was kind of too much, for me anyway. But musically, I think it's a really good album, and I know a lot of people really like it, and it's some people's favorite album by us. So I'm not saying it was a bad album at all.
Talk more about the tour.
When we got on the tour, it should have been a lot of fun, but it wasn't. I think everybody was feeling a bit isolated. We weren't really hanging out with Fish anymore. There was a lot of cloak and dagger stuff going on with Fish wanting to fire Paul Lewis, our tour manager, and then wanted to fire John Arneson. And there was, and for me, being on stage, on these huge stages, we were all much further apart. So it didn't feel like I was in a band anymore. I was kind of like on this big riser by myself. And then I could see the other members of the band, you know, 30, 40, 50 feet away from me, you know. And it was kind of very isolated and not much fun. There wasn't that the onstage communication that you get, you know, between the band
Yeah.
members.
What
It's
happens? What kind of on-stage communication do you have? Like glancing at each other and smiling,
Yeah,
or
exactly. Yeah, or just the, you know, the knowing looks and the, you know, when something's going on, you know, there's there's a sense of fun, and or even if things aren't going well, you feel like you're able to communicate if you can see each other properly and you're close enough, and it just felt too big in a way. And the audiences as well. For me, the front of the stage was so far away. The front row,
yeah.
and then the front row was behind a barrier because they would have a big area between the stage and the barrier, and then the front rows would be even further away. You could barely see their faces, you know. So imagine, and you're playing to like 10,000 people, and it's just a faceless crowd, really. So it's kind of not that
Does that
enjoyable.
not help your stage fright a little bit?
Um, yeah, it certainly didn't make any difference to me whether we were playing to 50 people or 50,000. I have to say, it doesn't make any difference.
But you
You
still
can
get
be
stage fright.
well, no, as in I wouldn't be any more scared.
Oh,
I didn't really have stage fright. There was only a few times when I was literally like, you know, petrified.
I
But you
thought you
get
did
used to
get a
the
little bit.
a
Yeah.
little bit at the in the early days, yeah, when you're first on a big stage. The very first time we played in a festival, for example, and then after that, it would only be the shows that felt like they were really important, you know, like the Royal Albert
When you
Hall,
played
or
the Royal, yeah, I was gonna say when you played the Royal Albert Hall.
but it was more. It was some nerves, but also excitement as well, you know. Or if you're filming or recording for a special show, you know, for a radio station or
Yeah.
something, that can make it more nerve-wracking. Or if something goes wrong, if you have some sort of major equipment failure during the show, you know, and then it really puts you on edge.
Yeah. Who do you communicate with most on stage
Um,
now?
Probably H or Ian. Only because Steve R is in front of me, and usually he's facing the other way. And most of the time, when Steve looks at you, it's to make a face that like is like you've done something wrong. You know,
Yeah, I was
he makes a
gonna.
face. He makes a face like he's smelt some cheese or something, and he sort of goes. We call it the blue cheese face. You know, and Pete tends to come bouncing over, you know, and well, occasionally we'll have a little bit of eye contact, but it's mainly because me and Ian are at the back. We're kind of on the same level, you know, and the same distance from the front. And H is always coming over and, you know, doing stuff. Um, but I hate it when he introduces me just before I do a solo because that puts me on edge.
Like, what does he do?
He just says, and on keyboards, Mark Kelly. And I'm like, oh shit, shut up. And I told him not to do it, and he still does it. And then he goes, after the show, he'll say, oh, I'm sorry, I forgot. I'm not supposed to do that, am I? And I go, no. Yeah. So I do still get nervous.
Yeah. So is the only time you're really spending time with Fish at this point when you're playing?
Oh, honestly, yeah, it was bad. We used to avoid him. I can remember we'd have like phone calls. Are you going out? Yeah, let's go and get some food. Meet you in the lobby. No, don't meet in the lobby. We might run into Fish, you know. It was kind of like that. It
Oh,
was
that's
trying to
really bad.
avoid him, yeah. And then, you
Did
know,
he was he trying to avoid you too?
well, as I said, he used to hang around a lot with the crew and and also his security guards. There was two
Yeah, this is
brothers. I think they
interesting.
were brothers. One of them was called Andre. I remember that. They were big German guys. They were huge, like wide shoulders with big muscles, and
Yeah.
I don't know why he thought he needed security. I mean, he's always the biggest person in the room anyway, you know.
Do you think the
And
fame's
he's
gone to his head?
Possibly. He continued to have a security guard even after he left the band. I remember the very first time he wanted to come and see us play after he'd left the band. He turned up with a security guy, like a bodyguard, you know. And
Right.
we're like, "Who's this?" And he's like, "It's my security." I'm like, "What do you need security for?" I can remember, avoiding him because you'd go out and then it'd get to like 2 or 3 a.m. and you're like, I'm going to bed now. And he'd be like, "Oh, you're fucking lightweight," you know, and he'd make you feel really bad for wanting to go to bed at 3 a.m., you know. so,
I
so
would have just
that's,
said go to bed.
I know,
Yeah.
but that's kind of, and we'd have a gig the next day, you know, so it's not
Yeah.
like it was a day off. So we were irresponsible up to a point, the other members of the band, and but at least we tried to be professional. And I think I pointed out that Ian was very professional, and he used to get Privet to record the shows on a cassette, and after the gig, he would take it back to his hotel room or onto the bus, and he would listen to it. He'd listen through the whole show,
For
and
mistakes.
basically make notes, yeah, to see what was good and what was bad and what needed improving. So there was always that sense that, you know, you didn't want to upset Ian or play badly, or be
Is he
or
like
be,
the boss?
you know.
Was he like the boss?
He was definitely the musical boss, I'd say, you know, in terms of quality control of the quality of the band's music. So turning up hungover and you know, lack of sleep to a sound check or a gig was just not advisable, shall we say. So I think it was a good thing. It was a good thing that he was being professional, because I think it helped to keep me, and especially me and Pete, we were the worst. But out of the players in the band, Fish didn't care. He was just having a good time all the time, you know. I was checking, and I remember we got a 20 grand bonus at the end of the tour, and in today's money, that's about 70 grand. So it wasn't nothing.
That's a lot of money, yeah.
Yeah, it was a lot of money, but by comparison, John was probably making, you know, 10 times that, at least. Yeah, so we weren't complaining, as you can imagine. If somebody gave
Are
me
you investing any of this? Like, what are you doing with this money? You're just spending it.
spending it, yeah. Yeah, if I'd been a bit more careful and invested some of that money, I probably would have been financially more secure now. But that's, you know, I was 25, 26 years old, you know.
Yeah. I
Yeah,
can't
it's
imagine
hard.
having 70 grand.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
you kind of don't think about in a few years' time it could all be over, you know. But that's the reality, and it kind of was financially, because by the mid 90s, it was things were tight, you know.
You dislocate your shoulder.
Again, I dislocate my shoulder again. Yeah, I think that was like the third or fourth time I'd done it, because there was the first time that Fish wrenched it out of its socket in Scotland in '82, and then again with the chasing Paul Lewis down the stairs in America in '83 or '84. And then I think that was oh, and once when I was taking Freya and Kai swimming, I did some sort of underwater swimming thing, and my shoulder dislocated while I was in the swimming pool.
Oh my
And
God.
yeah, so I dislocated my shoulder yet again. I think the incident with Freya and Kai was probably round about that sort of time.
A doctor, or you said it could have been just someone who'd grabbed a white coat and called himself a doctor.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, the guy. He was literally. I was lying on the floor, and he was putting he took his shoe off, but he put his foot in my armpit and pulled on my arm, and it was like to try and. It's like,
Put it back in.
it was like something he'd seen on a movie. You know, oh, this is how you put a dislocated shoulder back in, and he's telling me just relax, and I'm in real agony. You know, I'm like, you fucking relax. It's really hurting. You know. So they took me to hospital, and while I was waiting, it kind of just went back in by itself.
And then you do a tour in Poland,
That was fun.
and you're given like
Yeah.
loads of money by the government.
Yeah, they paid us $100,000, which was quite a decent amount of money to do the tour, and it was about 5 or 6 shows. But they also gave us zlotys, which was the Polish currency at the time, spending money each day. So we were taken to this nice restaurant, and then the food they gave us was so bad it was almost inedible. And they were saying this was a good restaurant. So people had it really rough. It was really tough before the Iron Curtain
Why
came
was the
down.
food
Before
so
the,
bad?
just because they didn't have access to good quality ingredients, you know, and there was no orange juice, no Coca-Cola. There was that. I mean, there was a shortage of things like coffee. There was lots of things you just couldn't get. And I remember one night we were in this hotel, me and Ian, and a few days previously they'd given us some tins of Russian caviar, and we were hungry, so we just ate the caviar out of the tins.
Oh my God.
Which is a bit salty. It's not very good on its own, really, caviar.
No.
Yeah, but that was it. We were hungry. There was nothing to eat. There was no restaurant, no vending machines. We went, I know, let's crack open the caviar.
Yeah, nice.
And just everybody was just drinking gallons of vodka, as far as I remember. But it was fun. Yeah, we were treated really really well, you know, by the locals, and the audiences were going crazy. We were playing to big audiences as well. So it was an interesting time.
The single's climbing the charts and it's stuck at number 6.
That's right. Incommunicado.
Incommunicado, yeah. But you said you should have picked Warm Wet Circles.
Probably, or even Sugar Mice, because I think either of those songs is probably more radio friendly. But I think our thinking, rightly or wrongly, probably wrongly, was we'd had 2 pop songs, Kaylee and Lavender, which were quite gentle, quite not pop, but you know what I mean, not rock.
Yeah.
And then Incommunicado was a bit more of a rock song, a bit more up tempo. We figured we didn't want to alienate our fans, so we thought, okay, we'll give them Incommunicado, and then it's a bit more proggy, just to let them know, you know, the new album it isn't going to be even more in the direction of Lavender, for example. But of course, it got a lot of play on Radio 1, and all it did was stayed at number 6 for 2 weeks. So it went in at number 6 because the fans all bought it, and then they played it like 20 or 30 times that week on the main radio station, Radio 1, and it didn't go up. So it was like nobody was buying it, or some people bought it. But if that had been a more radio friendly song, it probably would have climbed the charts, you know, higher, definitely, with that much play, you know.
Yeah.
So, and then the album came out and would have gone to number 1, apart from the fact that Whitney Houston was released the same week as us, and I think we sold 100,000 copies in the first. Yeah, we sold like 100,000 copies in the first week, which is a gold disc in the first week. But I think she sold like 200,000 or something. You know.
Wow.
So we got to number 2.
Whose idea was it to make that the single?
I can't remember, but I was definitely on board with the idea. I think we all were. The big gigs that we were playing all over Europe, including the Bercy in France, which was like 16,000, and then there was like these big, huge shows in Germany. And I said in the book that one night it was like, I think I must have gone back to the hotel to have a nap or something, and then rushed back to the gig, was late, got to the gate at the backstage, and there was a security guard there, just wouldn't let me in. I didn't have my pass. I left it at the hotel, and he just wouldn't listen. And I was like, I'm in the band, and it was like, where's your pass? You know, it's like talking to Arnold Schwarzenegger, you know, and he just wouldn't let me in. I'm going, please, the band are going on stage, and I've got to be there. And then luckily, across the yard, I saw one of the crew walk out of one of the doors. They were probably nipping out for a cigarette or something. And I shouted, and they came over and got the tour manager, Paul Lewis, and then finally let me in. So I just about made it in time. But yeah, the security was really, really tough. It's happened to me a few times, actually. Has that ever happened
to anyone else? Yeah, I guess it's a problem with not being the front man, maybe. You're just not very recognisable.
Yeah. There was one time this was with, in the very early days of the band, I can't remember if I mentioned this in the book, We were playing at it was a club in Scarborough, and they had an elevator, a lift, in the dressing room, and there was like a bunch of, you know, some elevators have the keys. They have like a key that you have to turn to select the floor to stop people going on certain floors. There'd be buttons, but then instead of a button, there'd be a key hole where you have to put a key in to turn it. This lift, it had a bunch of keyholes and one button. And it had one button, and I was in there with Mick, the drummer. And I pressed the button, and the door shut, and it went down to the ground floor and opened onto the street at the back of the venue. And then I'm looking at it, and of course, all the other buttons were keys. We didn't have a key, so we couldn't go back up. So we were literally out on the street at the back of the venue just before the band went on stage, in our stage clothes. And then we're like, oh, what do we do now?
What are your stage
so we had to go round,
like a sackcloth?
Probably. So we had to go round to the front of the venue and then in through the front door and convince the security to let us in. We had to walk through the audience and up onto the stage. It was really, that was one of the many stupid things I've done. But yeah, so that time in Germany when I couldn't get the security guy to let me in was pretty bad. But yeah, I think there were definitely some fun times on that tour. I can remember, enjoying a lot of it, and then just some of it being really, really depressing. And that whole situation when we were going to America, and yeah, we were out of control, all of us, when I think about it, because I said about Fish spending money on security guards that he didn't need, and he had a wardrobe girl to look after his furry pajamas, and he had this suit with flames on the sleeves and the ankles. It was like, I used to make jokes about it, saying, "Oh, you must be in Earth, Wind and Fire. Which one are you?" That sort of thing. And yeah, he had this thing that looked like a bear suit, and he had a girl just to iron his clothes each day. There was a lot of excess spending that didn't need to happen. We insisted on taking all of our equipment to America, even though we were doing a club tour, and the equipment took up 2 articulated lorries. And I said when we arrived at that first show in California, a place called San Juan Capistrano, the guy who ran the venue couldn't believe that we turned up with these 2 trucks full of gear. And of course, it was a tiny venue. Yeah, it was like a 500 capacity venue with a tiny stage,
Yeah.
But yeah, there was that whole situation on the flight over. I remember Fish basically saying he wanted to fire John, and Andy Field, who's not with us anymore. So I'm not going to. This wasn't Andy's idea, I'm sure. Andy was the crew boss. He should take over the job of managing the band, and we were like, not really anything we would consider. Even though we knew John was a total liability, at least he was used to dealing with Fish. If we had somebody like Andy, he would basically just do what Fish wanted, and Fish would very quickly take control of the whole thing, So that was kind of why we resisted that. Not out of, well, there was some loyalty to John, but I think it was mainly because we just thought, how would we deal with Fish if there was nobody to act as a buffer between us and him,
Yeah. Would Andy not have done that?
I don't know. I think he probably would have just done what he wanted.
He would have, people pleased him maybe a bit. I don't know.
Yeah. Although John did a lot of that as well. As I said, John just did whatever the band asked or Fish asked. And I think quite a lot of it was motivated by the fact that he realised that he might not be around for much longer, So the whole thing about taking advances from the record company rather than asking for better royalties suited John, because it's money, it's jam today,
Yeah. You said the America tour was your worst tour. Is that your worst tour? Yeah.
It probably made it worse by the fact that we were back playing tiny venues again, small places, after the success of Europe and being a big band in Europe. It was all back to we'd gone back 3 or 4 years, and consequently, it would have been even more difficult on the personal relationship front, because we were all much, at least when there was a tour bus for the band and we had cars. I mean, BMW lent us cars just to drive around in for the whole tour. We had
Oh
these
my God.
7 Series BMWs to drive, and
Oh my God.
yeah, it was, yeah, just because we put BMW on the tour posters,
That's so cool.
that was, yeah. And Puma, they would turn up with their catalogue and say, you can choose anything you want from the catalogue, and they would just deliver it to us. This is what happens
As
when
many
you're in a
things as
successful
you,
band.
yeah, it's when you're
Yeah,
famous.
anything
yeah.
wanted. Yeah. People will just
Yeah.
give you stuff because they want you. They basically want you
They
to
want
wear
your
their
name
stuff.
on it. Yeah.
And there's some hilarious band pictures of us all wearing Puma stuff. So it obviously worked. And just look at it, we're just like a complete fashion disaster. We're all dressed in Puma tracksuits, Puma tops, Puma shoes. Yeah, we all had Puma,
Yeah,
Puma
I think
briefcases.
all your clothes, I think pre like early 2000s just look awful in the photos I've seen. Like your fashion sense is
Thank
really
you.
bad.
Thank you. Yeah, I have to.
Anyway.
I have to agree with you.
You meet Prince Edward.
That's right. So the end of before we went to America, the end of the European tour, we finished off at Wembley
The
Arena.
least
and
relevant
in the,
royal.
I think he drew the short straw. It was
Yeah.
a charity show. We added an extra show at the end of the run of Wembley Arena shows, and it was to raise money for muscular dystrophy. In the usual charity gig format, we had guest musicians, including Bruce Dickinson and Nicko from Maiden. That's the singer and the drummer. And we had we had Buffin from Mott the Hoople, because we did a Mott the Hoople song called All the Young Dudes. And so we asked him to get up and play with us. The guy hadn't played drums for years. He worked at the BBC as a sound engineer. He was terrified. He turned up in
Oh
a
God.
tuxedo with a bow tie, and Bruce introduced him as
Oh.
Puffin, even though his name was Buffin. I think Buffin was a nickname. Anyway, poor guy. He was really sweet, but he clearly was like absolutely petrified of getting up and playing drums on a song that obviously he should have known how to play, because it was one that his band did years previously. He probably hadn't played
Yeah.
drums for 10 years.
Right.
But it was sweet. Yeah, and so yeah, meeting Prince Edward, not Andrew, never met him. Meeting Prince Edward. Should we cut that bit? No, leave it in.
No.
It's fine. Okay, stop laughing then.
Sorry. Go on.
So Prince Edward arrives, and I'm there standing beside, and we all have to line up to meet him, and Nicko's next to me with his wife, and and I'm like, "Hello, sir, please." And Nicko's like, "All right, mate," literally just calls him mate, because Nicko just didn't care, How's it going,
Yeah.
mate? And I think it really pissed him off, because he said, "Oh, did you meet your wife before or after you became famous?" Trying to imply that he was, because Nicko's a bit like this, but he didn't care. Yeah, he's
And
a
his
good
wife
guy. He's very
presumably was
funny.
very attractive.
Yes, exactly. You get the point he was trying to make, having a little subtle dig.
Yeah, and then it kind of ends, and Fish loses his voice, and you have to cancel gigs, which we've already mentioned.
More gigs cancelled. Yeah, I don't think it was so many. It wasn't like the UK tour that we cancelled back in 1985. But still, yeah, it was a bit depressing that we had to cancel gigs. And it wasn't the last time we had to cancel gigs either. There was more. Before we wrap up, if you're listening to this on Spotify or Apple Podcasts or whatever, and you want to see the video instead, although why you'd want to watch it all again, but if you go to Patreon,
You
to our
might want
Prog and
to.
Progeny page on Patreon, you can see the video, and also there's the me reading the chapter from the book as well, which won't be obviously on the video. That's about it, really. And next time we're going to have Nick Davis, who was the sound engineer on Clutching at Straws and co-producer on Season's End. Nick's done quite a bit of work with us over the years, so I'm sure he'll have some fun, interesting stories to tell of our times recording those albums. And that's about it for now, isn't it?
Yep.
So I'm going to do a shout out to our new subscribers. Thank you very much. Hugh Blemmings, Steve Barker, Stuart Goff, Mark Hughes, Pat Hart, and Ed Martin. Pat sent a really nice email, actually, message to saying how much he was enjoying the podcast. So
Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time.
thanks for listening. See you next time.